On March 27, 2004, tragedy struck in Texas as a man committed one of the most disturbing crimes in Texas criminal history. The man, Andrew Lee Thomas, is an American convicted murderer and death row inmate known for gouging out both of his eyeballs in separate incidents and ingesting one of them. Yes, you heard that right. In 2004, Thomas killed his estranged wife Laura Boren, his 4-year-old son, and her 1-year-old daughter in Sherman, Texas. He cut open the chests of all 3 victims, and he removed the 2 children's hearts. Following these heinous acts, Thomas was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, and his case has ever since raised ethical questions about whether or not it is right to execute the mentally ill. Welcome to Mia's reality channel, where we bring you compelling true crime stories. From unsolved mysteries to notorious criminals, we leave no stone unturned as we navigate the dark corridors of real-life crimes. So, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to stay updated about new uploads. Now, let's get back to the story. Thomas was born on March 17, 1983, in Muskogee County, Oklahoma, to Rochelle and Danny Thomas. Thomas had 5 brothers, and his mother raised them mostly by herself in Sherman, Texas, 60 miles from Dallas. However, despite Rochelle's resilience as a mother of 6, she was an alcoholic who also struggled with depression, stemming from the sexual abuse she faced as a child. Andrew Thomas' early years were marked by hardship, living in a home that lacked basic necessities like running water, heat, and electricity. Growing up in such challenging conditions would have undoubtedly shaped his resilience and outlook on life. Adding to the difficulties, Thomas was surrounded by family members battling substance abuse and violence. These issues likely created a tumultuous environment, impacting his development and sense of stability. The tragedy struck even before Thomas was born, as his uncle was fatally shot by his grandmother's husband a decade prior. This event would have had a profound effect on the family dynamics, possibly contributing to the complex web of challenges Thomas faced in his formative years. However, despite facing challenges at home, Thomas appeared to be thriving in the first few years of his life. He attended a Baptist church in Sherman, where his former Sunday school teacher described him as a smart and respectful boy who showed curiosity and talent, particularly in sketching futuristic cars and working on old cars. He was also part of the gifted and talented program at his school. However, around the age of 9, Thomas's behavior started to change. He began saying and doing strange delusional things, like telling classmates that he heard angels and demons arguing in his head. At one point, he claimed to be Raiden, a fictional character from the video game Mortal Kombat, and he seemed sincere in his belief. Thomas also started drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana, possibly in an attempt to silence the voices he was hearing. When Andrew turned 12, he was placed on probation due to his bizarre behaviors. By the age of 13, he had attempted suicide twice by cutting his wrists. At around 15, he had several arrests, including one for stealing a car. Following a brief stay in juvenile detention, where he developed suicidal thoughts, he was placed on suicide watch. However, he did not receive continued mental health support after being released. While in 9th grade, Thomas had a baby with his longtime girlfriend Laura Boren. Laura, born on November 7, 1983, gave birth to their son, Andrew Jr., in August 1999. Following Andrew Jr.'s birth, Thomas dropped out of school in 9th grade, obtained a high school equivalency diploma, and worked multiple jobs to support Boren and their child. On his 18th birthday in 2001, Thomas married Boren, who was 17 at the time. They initially lived at Thomas's mother's house, but were asked to leave after 2 weeks. Boren and Andrew Jr. moved in with her parents, while Thomas moved in with one of his brothers. The couple separated about 4 months into their marriage. Boren later moved in with a new boyfriend, with whom she had a child, Leah Hughes, in February 2003. After his marriage ended, Thomas experienced more severe delusions and suicidal thoughts. He became fixated on apocalyptic ideas from the Book of Revelation and struggled to maintain employment. Thomas was accused of stabbing his brother during an altercation, but he was not formally charged, and his brother was admitted for psychiatric treatment. Living independently, Thomas had trouble paying his bills, leading Boren to restrict his visitation with their son. Thomas started to believe that Boren was like Jezebel from the Bible, and that their son was the Antichrist. He believed that the meaning of life was hidden in the images on the US dollar bill, and often felt like he was experiencing déjà vu. At times, he would cover his mouth with duct tape and refuse to speak to his family. In the spring of 2004, while still battling alcohol abuse and psychological issues, Thomas began using Coricidin cold medication recreationally. On March 5, a friend took him to a mental health clinic where Thomas expressed suicidal thoughts. The clinic advised him to go to the emergency room and prepared an emergency detention order, but Thomas did not go to the ER that day. About 3 weeks later, Thomas stabbed himself in the chest and went to the emergency room at Texoma Medical Center in Denison. He told hospital staff he was trying to cross over into heaven. Since the wound was not life-threatening, the hospital began arranging psychiatric care. However, Thomas left the hospital before these arrangements were finalized. The hospital alerted the police that Thomas might be a danger, but he returned home to Sherman without police contact. On March 27, 2004, 2 days after leaving the emergency room, Thomas went to Boren's third-floor apartment and kicked the door open. Boren's boyfriend was at work, but Boren was home with her 2 children. Thomas fatally stabbed her, cut open her chest, and pulled out a portion of her lung, thinking he was actually removing her heart. He went to the bedroom shared by their 4-year-old son and Boren's 13-month-old daughter, fatally stabbed both children, and cut their hearts out of their chests. After killing the children, 21-year-old Thomas proceeded to stab himself 3 times in the chest. Expecting to die from his wounds, Thomas went into the living room and lay next to Boren's body. After realizing that he was not dying, he placed the victim's organs in his pockets and walked to his house. Once he returned home, he placed the organs in a bag and threw it in the trash. Thomas called his wife's parents and left a voicemail, seeking help. Thomas later turned himself in at the Sherman Police Department, telling officers there that he thought God wanted him to kill the victims. He said he killed each victim with a separate knife because he thought there were demons inside the victims. If the victim's blood was allowed to mix, he reasoned, then the demons might survive. Thomas was taken to a hospital and underwent chest surgery. 5 days after the murders, while Thomas was in jail awaiting trial, he removed his right eye with his bare hands. According to one source, he had been reading the Bible when he came to Matthew 5:29, which said, "If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out." Another source said that after pulling the eye out, he quoted Mark 9:47, "And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It is better to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell." Psychologists who interviewed Thomas to determine his competence to stand trial diagnosed Thomas with schizophrenia. Declared incompetent to stand trial, he was sent to North Texas State Hospital in mid-June 2004. After Thomas spent 47 days in the hospital, psychiatrist Joseph Black wrote to the court that Thomas had drug-induced psychosis, saying that he was competent and that he might attempt to exaggerate his mental illness by engaging in self-harm or other aberrant behavior. Defense attorney R.J. Hagood, who was ill with pancreatitis during the trial, later said he regretted not objecting to the introduction of Black's statement. On February 15, 2005, Thomas's murder trial began. However, he was only tried for the death of Boren's daughter. Thomas, who is black and had been in an interracial relationship with Boren, faced an all-white jury. On a questionnaire for potential jurors, 3 of the selected jurors and 1 alternate juror indicated that they were opposed to interracial couples marrying or having children. Sanity remained a central issue throughout the legal proceedings. Thomas' demeanor in the courtroom was often described as almost catatonic, and he was observed snacking on Skittles candy during the presentation of graphic testimony. His defense team argued for his insanity, highlighting his erratic behavior and citing his history of mental illness. However, the state contended that Thomas's mental state was either caused or exacerbated by drug use, invoking Texas law, which disallows an insanity defense if the mental condition resulted from voluntary intoxication. Despite the defense's assertion that Thomas's self-inflicted eye injury demonstrated his insanity, prosecutors countered that it was merely an impulsive act rather than a sign of insanity. Ultimately, Thomas was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. Following his sentencing, Thomas was transferred to the Polunsky Unit, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice facility, where male death row inmates are housed. Despite being incarcerated, Thomas claimed that he continued to hear voices and experienced vivid hallucinations. He reported seeing 6-inch-tall demons emerging from the prison walls and playing music from the band queen. In July 2008, he attempted suicide again, this time by cutting the front of his neck with a sharp object. He required 8 stitches for the wound. In October 2008, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed Thomas's conviction. In a concurring opinion, Judge Kathy Cochran expressed a nuanced view. She said, "While there may be differing opinions on whether Thomas was sane at the time of the murders or competent during his trial, these issues were thoroughly examined by the defense, prosecution, trial judge, and jury. This is undeniably a tragic case. Thomas exhibits signs of mental illness, but under Texas law, he is considered legally sane." On December 9, 2008, Thomas took a drastic and disturbing action. He removed his left eye and then ate it. He claimed that he did so to prevent the United States federal government from reading his thoughts. Following this self-harm, Thomas received medical treatment at a hospital in Tyler. Subsequently, he was transferred to the TDC's Jester IV Unit, a facility that specifically houses Texas prisoners with mental health issues. Thomas' trial attorney expressed relief that he would finally receive the psychiatric care they had been advocating for. In early 2020, Thomas' case was brought before the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Attorney Catherine Carroll argued that Thomas' original legal representation was ineffective. She claimed that his trial attorneys failed to object to the selection of 3 jurors who expressed bias against interracial marriages. Carroll also stated that Thomas's trial counsel did not accurately present his long-standing psychiatric issues, failed to request a competency hearing, and presented a psychiatrist as an expert witness despite lacking expertise in cases where mental illness was allegedly drug-induced. In response to the appeal, prosecutors acknowledged evidence of Thomas's mental illness, but argued that it did not amount to legal insanity. In April 2021, the Fifth Circuit upheld the trial court's verdict, affirming Thomas's conviction and death sentence. On October 11, 2022, the Supreme Court denied Thomas's petition for a writ of certiorari to review his case, as decided by the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Justice Sotomayor wrote a dissenting opinion, joined by Justices Kagan and Jackson. The dissent upheld Thomas' claim that his counsel provided ineffective assistance, stating that they fell far below an objective standard of reasonableness, thereby violating his Sixth Amendment right to effective counsel. The dissent also agreed with Thomas's argument that seating jurors who expressed bias against interracial marriage violated his Sixth and 14th Amendment rights to a fair trial by an impartial jury. The dissenting opinion highlighted that Thomas's counsel failed to use their peremptory strikes effectively against jurors who openly displayed racial animus and objected to interracial marriage. This failure, according to the dissent, compromised Thomas's right to a fair trial. Thomas's case has sparked debates about the legal standards for insanity defenses, particularly regarding the criteria for determining whether a defendant knew the difference between right and wrong. Texas law previously used wording that was more supportive of insanity defenses. However, this changed in 1982 after public outcry following John Hinckley Jr.'s acquittal for his assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. In response to these concerns, politicians have proposed legislative changes to clarify that a sane defendant is one who appreciates rather than knows the difference between right and wrong. However, such proposed changes to the wording of the law have been rejected by the Texas legislature multiple times. In cases where a defendant is acquitted on an insanity defense, they typically go to a psychiatric hospital and remain under court supervision, even if they are eventually released. However, Texas law prohibits the defense or the prosecution from informing jurors about what will happen to a defendant in the event of such an acquittal. To address this issue, Texas Representative Senfronia Thompson introduced House Bill 1150. The bill aimed to change the wording in the law from know to appreciate regarding the defendant's understanding of right and wrong. Additionally, it would have required that jurors be informed of the potential consequences of acquittal for defendants who pursue an insanity defense, such as Thomas. However, the bill was left pending in a subcommittee in 2009 and did not progress further. In a 2015 publication, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights highlighted the ethical dilemmas presented by cases such as Thomas's and fellow Texas death row inmates Scott Panetti's. The report stated that these individuals, through no fault of their own, are tormented souls suffering from devastating afflictions that leave them unable to think and reason like people who are not so afflicted. That is a greater punishment than any court can impose. Initially scheduled for execution on April 5, 2023, Thomas was granted a delay by State District Judge Jim Fallon on March 7, 2023. The judge extended the deadline for Thomas's lawyers to prepare a request for a competency hearing until July 5, 2023. Thomas is currently housed in a Texas prison facility for inmates with psychiatric problems as he awaits execution. Now, do you think people like Thomas have control over their actions, or are they just driven by unknown forces? Also, do you think he still deserves the death penalty? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more.